Well, thanks so much. This is your actually the first race director interview that we're doing on the new platform. So I really appreciate you coming on and getting on here with you. It's kind of like it's just a quick 20 minutes, vitals and what's going on with the event to give everybody an idea of what's just get a little bit more information on it. And then what I'll do is I'll post the recording on Facebook, on YouTube. I'll link it out so that people can see the all the replays. But so let's just start with the basics. So for those of you who haven't, followed Last Paddler Standing, where's 2025 going to be held? When and tell me a little bit about the venue.
So the 2025 Last Paddler Standing is actually moving for the first time. Historically, it has been in Sarasota, Florida at Nathan Benderson Park the first 3 years. We had it there. But for 2025, we're actually moving it to Lake June and Winter, which is right in the middle of the state of Florida in Highlands County. And it's right outside of the town of Lake Placid. And it's this really awesome lake that is has a relatively protected cove on the eastern side of the lake. And so we're going to do the race in about 2/3 of that cove, and then about a third of the race is going to go out into the open section of the lake, which is definitely not protected.
Yeah.
So really excited to give racers a new venue to test themselves. We see a lot of repeat racers, and so it's kind of neat to give them something different to experience.
Well, that sounds cool. I mean, that leads us right into the format because it's such a unique format. Now, maybe you could explain how that works.
Yeah. So Last Paddler Standing is an homage to the Backyard Ultra, which is a um, a style of trail running race that has been around for about 10-ish years. And in that format, in the Backyard Ultra format, um, racers run it's like a 4.2 mile loop on the hour every hour. And everybody does it until they quit or they time out on a loop, and it gets all the way down to the last runner. And so I had been thinking for a number of years that it would be cool to see something like that on water. And I don't think there's a better paddle craft option to do this than a stand-up paddleboard. And so I made the loop distance a little bit smaller than the Backyard Ultra to make it more fit in with what I thought was sort of the distance you would go in an hour that wouldn't necessarily have you going at 100%, but probably still needed you going at 75%. And so yeah, so the format is that on the hour they start the loop, and they have to finish that 3.33 miles within the hour, and then it starts again at the top of the hour, and it goes all the way in that format for 48 hours. And then the loop distance increases to 4.9 miles at the 49th hour.
At the 49th hour.
Yeah.
So do you have people that use different strategies? I know with the running and trail running races, sometimes they either pick a pace that's very slow where they get just a little bit of rest, or they pick a faster pace where they get a longer, what strategies seem to work best? Um,
I think that the strategies for most of these athletes tend to tend to change a little bit during the race given what they're experiencing in that moment. So I believe that most of them would tell you that they come into it with a set strategy of I'm going to do X this way every loop, every hour for as long as I can do it. But generally, it comes a point where they need to adjust that a little bit. And so I think what you see is I think many of them are trying to straddle the line of what can I do where I'm not exerting a ton of energy, but I'm also not getting myself too close to the end of the hour where I have to then turn around and do it all over again without being able to, grab some food or rest for a second or go to the bathroom or something like that. So that's that fine line. However, you will see some of them that will charge really hard for a lap. Let's say they get done in 34, 35 minutes, and then they're banking that 25 minutes for time to take like a 10-minute nap,
Hmm.
or something like that. And then you will see some that will really be suffering because they haven't slept in a while. And so they don't care if it takes them, you know, 53, 54 minutes to finish that lap. They just don't want to exert too much energy. They want to just kind of keep it going as long as they can. Um, that method does tend to ultimately bite you at some point. But we do see most of them kind of interchange between how they're feeling lap to lap.
Yeah, so what are well, I guess we're kind of burying the lead. How long did last year's race go? And John Batson was the winner last year. Um,
So yeah, so it got into the 50th loop last year with John. However, John missed the hour cutoff by 40 seconds. So the way that works is technically the race wins. There is no winner from the 2024 race. However, John is recognized as the last paddler within the
mhm.
race, but there is no actual last paddler standing, if that makes sense. I give the winners a custom wrestling belt, like a really cool, like
Yeah.
WWF wrestling belt. And unfortunately, I got to take that home last year. So yeah, so for the first time ever, the race actually won. But John is, quite frankly, John is if you were to ever have somebody in your race that had to go through that experience, if you ever had to have somebody that was going to go so far and push so long, and then, you know, have that awful thing happen at the end and do it with such grace and class,
Yeah.
John Batson's your guy.
Sure is, isn't he?
And so I was, while I felt terrible that the race won and that I felt like the bad guy, those are the rules that I made. And you
No,
know,
that's great.
and
That's
John was the recipient, but he also really took it well.
Yeah. Well, that's all part of it, right? Like that's
Yeah.
and that's what makes it unique, and also sticking to the rules makes that consistency, because when you don't, year to year, I've seen events that have um, changed the rules at the last minute to accommodate certain things, but it ends up coming around, and not a distrust thing, but there's a certain amount of um, uh, I guess it is kind of a trust thing. So they basically want to keep the everything intact. It's kind of like this seems like it has like a Barkley Marathons feel to it, Although I don't imagine they give you a package of t-shirts as their entry fee, or your socks, um, so what are what are the thresholds, and when do people usually start dropping off? Is it at 12, 24? Like, when do you see most of the people starting to kick it?
I mean, I think that historically, if we take conditions out of the discussion, just talk about, um, the athletes themselves and time frames where we see that. Um, you typically see probably 2/3 of the racers are out within the first 24 hours, and really more so within like the first 15 hours. Um, you know, I want anybody to do this race. I don't want to just get the people who think they're going to go out and win this. I want people that want to see how many loops they can do. And so inevitably we have people sign up that, are just there to see if they can do 4, 5, 6, 7 loops. And so, when they get done, they're proud and I'm proud that they did as much as they did. But we do see probably, I would say, about 2/3 are done, before the 24-hour mark. And then interestingly, we from like 27, 26 hours to, maybe 35 hours, we'll sometimes won't see anybody drop. It's like once you get into that next day and you've got the daylight, you've survived that first night, you get a little bit more re-energized and everything. And so we'll see people kind of doing pretty well through, the second daytime hours. It's that second night that we start to see the real attrition, and you're getting down to only the ones that are truly comfortable going hour after hour and are going to be fine until the 49th hour, and then they're going to, then things are going to really fall apart. So yeah, so I'd say we're always looking at maybe 6, 7, 8 individuals that are pushing hard to the 48-hour mark.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you look at something like the Barkley Marathons, which is a great there's a really cool documentary on that. I think it's still on
Mm-hmm.
Netflix, but
Yeah.
they had their you had a whole group of people that were out for just to see how far they could push themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have an intention of winning, but they just wanted to see how long they could go, and then the next year do better. And then you had this group of people that were in contention. You had your one person that was always winning it, four people that were in contention, and then you had your sacrificial lambs, is what they called them, the ones that came in talking a big game, and you had some side bets on when they would go out. But what type of personalities do you see come in that, say, 8 people that are really, you know, because someone like a John Batson has a very different personality, very, calm and but you have other people that are pretty intense in that endurance world. So how,
I think that you hit the nail on the head there in terms of, we do see different types of personalities in that last 6, 7, 8 people that are out there, which leads me to believe that um, it it's less to do with whether or not you're brash or you're quiet or anything like that, and more to do with what you can do internally with turning off your mind and the desire that your mind has for you to quit. And I've said this before. I, you know, I certainly take a ton of inspiration from Laz, who created Barkley and is the creator of the Backyard Ultras. I have crewed racers at Barkley before and been a part of that experience. And that has definitely played a role in my race directing and how I approach, how I approach the way I do things. And I do really focus on people's personalities and mentalities and how I think they're mentally going to help handle a race like this. But I think the common denominator between a John Batson, a Lindsey Tilton, a Blake Carmichael, a Bobby Johnson, Joran Gustafson, these Alex Samano, these people that have done it year in and year out and gone very far into the race, is that their mental strength, their mental capability to to push through is a common denominator between them. When some of them can be super brash and very loud talking and trying to get in the other person's head, and some of them can be like John and very quiet and focused, and yet they all just mentally, individually are really, really strong.
Yeah, do you uh how do you manage the safety component of that? Because I imagine, people pulling themselves out, but are there any how do you manage that whole process?
Well, I think that there's two main ways. One is I always have staff that are medically trained.
Hmm.
So I'm always going to lean on them if they see somebody that looks like they don't need to go back out on the board to say to me, "Hey, such and such shouldn't probably go back out there." And in most instances, I would say 90% of people that are doing this race have somebody there with them in a family friend crewing capacity, and they're probably going to uh, you know be more alert to this situation than even me or my staff are going to be. They're the ones really kind of picking up on and in most instances they're going to be the one to say to their racer, hey, I don't think you need to continue on. But we certainly do from a race management standpoint have medical on staff. But additionally, I think one thing that makes this race a little bit different than, say, Great Alabama 650, my other race where, they're going 10 days, 650 miles down a river. The the big difference is I'm seeing these racers every hour.
Yeah.
Like we are laying eyes on them constantly. And so now they can look really great on lap 30 and then come back and look terrible before 31. Like things can go downhill fast. But for the most part, we're seeing them and assessing them repeatedly all day and all night. So I think that puts in a pretty good safety component. I'd say lastly, the other big thing is I try to design courses where open water for a race like this is minimal. And so they're close to a shoreline
Yeah.
for the last 3 years, they were next to the shoreline the whole time. This year, they're going to be close to the shoreline for, over 2/3 of the race. And so even in the open section where they're not close to it, it's not a big section to go across. So they can always, bail out if they need to, get off the water if, and drop out of the race in a situation like that, because it's designed to keep them near the shore.
Yeah, so when you talk about the Alabama 650, when you have someone like was it John Nippers, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so he did that and he did this. So like, does it translate or does it? I mean, he's a dog, man. That guy can just like go and go and go. And
Man. I think the thing that translates is goes back to the ability to suffer and the mental toughness. That certainly, translates across these two races and across, something like Texas Water Safari,
yeah,
and something like the Everglades Challenge. Those types of events. It certainly, um, if you're wired to be able to do those things, then you're in good shape before you're even physically capable of doing it. But they are in terms of the 650 and last paddler standing, they're obviously two extremely different events. And I would say, um, weirdly enough, they are attracting a lot of crossover, even though they are very different events. You have, John Nippers, like you mentioned, has done both. Lindsey Tilton has done both. Bobby Johnson has done both. Trey Reeves has done both. And Bobby and Trey have both outright won the 650 as solo
yeah.
kayakers twice, and yet they're coming over to do last paddler standing on a board because they're endurance athletes and they love doing the long, hard things. And it's less about the type of craft and more about the experience and putting yourself out there for such a difficult challenge to them. But I'm seeing people that have never been on a board in their life coming over and doing last paddler standing because they were doing, the 650, and vice versa. Lindsey Tilton's great example. She did last paddler standing and then decided she was going to go do the 650 and became the first female ever to do it on a board. So it, interestingly enough, though they're vastly different races, they have the same type of people.
Yes, I was wondering about the aspects of logistical preparation. So my original question was, um, what parts of the logistics play a big role in this? But then, as you're talking about this, I wonder if those people who have brought over the logistics from a race like that, where they have an idea of, you know, uh, a race that'd make preparing for like a Chattajack or something, that's only 4 or 5, 6, 7 hours, where they have to just figure out 4 meals to something that's 24, 48,
Yeah.
So what are the, I guess, what are the key logistical prep type of aspects that make people successful if they were going to think about doing this? Like, how would they approach those logistics?
Well, I think there's a couple things. One, similar to what you talked about, a race like Chattajack is a really hard, long sprint. It's 31 miles of just go, go, go. You're going to consume some calories, but really you're just focused on getting through 31 miles, right? Um, and that's survivable. You can do that. You can take only water and some sort of nutrition within your water and get through 31 miles, and that's doable. For these races, that's not possible. You're going to need to understand what, not only what nutrition you need, but you got to understand what you individually can stomach when you're multiple days into an event and your stomach says, no, I don't want anything. You have to figure out what that thing is you can eat even when you don't want to eat it.
Mhm.
And that's what all these racers in some form or fashion have learned how to do over the course of their careers. um, you know that's that's a that's one of those learned things that you can't just read about it and say, well, I'm just going to go do this. You have to kind of experience it. You have to, same in trail running. If you're going to run 100-mile race, there comes a point where your stomach doesn't want to work anymore, but you're not going to finish that race if you don't figure out how to get some calories in yourself. And so, maybe the key is that you learn how to, eat everything you possibly can, so that no matter what, there's something that you like. That's certainly an intangible. I'd say the other one that I kind of touched on is both of these events work well for the racer who has people there to support them. And I mean, the 650, you're required to have a crew person. You're not for last paddler standing, but I think you are at a huge advantage if you do have people there that are in your tent area there to help you out each hour. Um, an outlier might be, Paolo Marconi, who won it the first year. He flew in the day before the race, won the race, flew out the day after the race, didn't have anybody there to help him out, and he came in and won it. I think he'd probably tell you today, going into this year's race, that would be harder for him because the first year nobody knew what we didn't know. And so he
Yeah.
could kind of, get through it and tough through it. Now people have got well-oiled machines in terms of crew helping them. And he would probably want that now. He would, he'd be up against some people that are definitely there to go for the long haul. And so I think that's an intangible that, these long distance races, they're very helpful or they're required. And if you can learn to rely on them, that's super, super helpful for you.
Yeah. So then this is the last question, and this is more for race directors. The more I talk to race directors and having been a race director myself, um, the more conversations I have around how difficult it is to have a healthy relationship with your own race. How do you keep from burning out? How do you keep the stoke and have with all these races that you've run, what have you learned that maybe other race directors are will eventually, because there's a cycle, they get if things start to go really well and they start to get burned out and sometimes groups break up? Like, what have
Yeah.
you learned along the way that can help other race directors?
Wow. That is a great question that I've never been asked. And I I super appreciate that question because I'm entering year 7 of Great Alabama 650. It's the longest paddle race in the country, and the second longest in the world. And I'm on the road for 12 to 13 days straight doing that race. And I love it, eat, sleep it, and breathe it. But inevitably, I come out of it every year kind of destroyed
Yeah.
for multiple weeks because of how hard it is to do that. And so my version of burnout is that time right after the race. It's not enough to the point where it's ever like, I don't want to do this anymore. But it's certainly, I certainly have had to learn how to deal with the version of myself after the race is
Yeah.
over. Um, and what I do is I take a full week, no matter what, right after the that event to do nothing within the paddling world. I don't talk to anybody. I don't I don't look online. I make one post after the race thanking everybody, and then I will disappear for a week and not look at water or anything like that. Um, and just decompress. And then a couple of weeks after that, I start to kind of reassess what the event is like, and how it went and things I want to do better for the next year. And I start to immediately get jazzed when I think about the things that we can improve on. And when I start to read all the comments from how much people enjoyed following along with the race, that gets me back going again. So I'd say those things are, for me, really crucial after the race to definitely step away from it, for a few days. I am guilty of constantly coming up with ideas for new events that I don't see. And I am guilty of maybe, jumping in and starting stuff, uh, because I just constantly want to create races. And so, um, you know, a couple of years after the 650, I was already coming up with the concept for Last Paddler Standing, and it took about 2 years to do it. But once I got to that point, we launched that. This year, I'm launching a new race in the UK next month that is
Yeah.
a team paddleboard race. And so what keeps me jazzed and going is coming up with new races and going, oh, I haven't seen that. Could I get a few people that would want to do it? Because my races are never going to be huge numbers. I don't want them to be huge numbers because I like to know everybody and be familiar with them and really have my hands on with the experience itself for everyone. But I also I just get really excited about like coming up with something different and weird, and putting it out there and having other people that like to experience those different weird things do it and give me advice on what they want to see more or better, and doing that. And that just constantly keeps me going. At some point I'm gonna have to stop creating races, but no time soon. I think I'm just going to keep doing this while keeping the ones going as successful as I possibly can.
We'll pop on and talk about the British one. We won't give that away just yet, but
Cool.
because that sounds really cool. I was just reading about that and got a couple of questions that, but well, really appreciate you. Again, to be able to run a race, I think there's just so much goes into it and so much passion goes into it, so much time and so much stuff that people don't see behind the scenes. So really appreciate that you put the time in to create something like this. And again, I'm going to post the recording of this. Can't thank you enough, and hopefully be able to catch up with you before December and the rest.
Yes, please do. And I hope everybody, even if you don't want to race Last Paddler Standing, just come hang out. It's such a great event just to be at and be in the atmosphere. And if you can't come hang out, make sure you watch the live stream. We're doing it nonstop again this year.
So cool. All right, Greg. Well, thanks so much, and I'll talk to you real soon, and I'll
Awesome.
send you the link. So thanks
Great.
everyone who came in and everyone who's watching.
Thanks.
Take care,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye.
Thanks, y'all.